Hello everyone, my name is Ruth, and you won't believe what I'm going to tell you today. From my little corner in my cottage in the country, I've seen a lot of things through the crack in my curtains, but this story you're about to hear has kept me up at night for weeks. Every afternoon, a man I've never seen before enters the house of Anna, my neighbor, who has been married to Daniel for 15 years. And look at this. This man always comes out shirtless, sweaty, after spending a few hours inside. My hair stood on end the first time I saw him. It was a Tuesday in March, and I remember it like it was yesterday. It was stiflingly hot, the kind that makes you want to stay home in just your slippers and nightgown. I was in the kitchen making my afternoon coffee. You know how it is, right? Those of us over 60 have our own schedules. I always have my coffee at 3:00 p.m. With some tapioca cookies I make myself. It's my sacred time of day. Well, I was stirring sugar in my coffee when I heard a motorcycle outside. You know, I've lived on this street for over 30 years. I know every sound. I know when it's the baker passing by in the morning, when it's the garbage man on Thursday, when it's Doña Benedita returning from the market with that distinctive sound of a plastic bag hitting the bike rack. But this motorcycle noise was different. It wasn't coming from any neighbor. I approached the living room window, the one facing the street, and discreetly peeked through the crack in the curtain. You have no idea how scared I was. He was a tall, dark-skinned man, about 40, wearing a white t-shirt and jeans. He got off his motorcycle, one of those big red ones, and looked at Anna's house as if he knew it well. He didn't hesitate for a second and headed straight for the gate. What struck me most was his attitude. He didn't go to the front door like any normal visitor. No, gentlemen. He went around the house and straight to the back, to Anna's backyard. My God. I thought, my God, what is this man doing? My heart was already racing because, you know, Anna is a married and educated woman. I'd never seen her talking to strangers on the street. I stood there by the window, my coffee cooling on the kitchen table, trying to understand what was going on. Anna's house has a low wall, the kind of exposed brick that was fashionable in the 1990s, and climbing plants that create a natural curtain. Still, from my window, I can see part of her backyard, especially the corner where the laundry room and utility room are. Look, guys, I confess I spent 15 minutes at the window, hoping to see some movement. Anna's husband, Daniel, works at a factory here in the area and doesn't get home until after 6 in the evening. Anna was always home alone at 3 in the afternoon. She works part-time at a local daycare, but she always gets home around 12:30. Suddenly, I saw movement in the backyard. A man appeared with what looked like an aluminum ladder, one of those extendable ones construction workers use. I thought, aha! It must be some worker Anna called to make some repairs. But then, whoops, the weirdness started. Why would a worker go straight to the back of the house without even ringing the doorbell? And why wasn't Anna supervising the work, like any housewife does? I got even more curious and decided to take my sewing chair, you know, that low chair we use to sit and crochet, and place it right next to the window. I opened the curtains a little, just enough to see inside without being seen. I've learned this technique over the years here in the neighborhood, because you know how older people tend to look away from the street, right? We see everything, we know everything that's going on. The man disappeared from my sight for a while. I assumed he had entered through the back of the house, through the kitchen door that most homes here have. I stood there, sipping my lukewarm coffee, trying to understand the situation. 1,000 theories began to swirl in my head. Could it be some relative of Anna's I didn't know? But what relative enters the house through the back without warning? An hour passed, 2 hours. I was still there, pretending to read a magazine, but really watching my neighbor's house. At 5:30 p.m., I finally saw movement. Guys, brace yourselves, because that's when I almost fell off my chair. The man appeared through the back door, but now, guys, now he was shirtless. Yes, you heard me. He came out of Anna's house, shirtless, holding his white t-shirt, all sweaty, as if he'd been working hard. His hair was messed up, plastered to his forehead with sweat, and he had an expression. How can I explain it? The expression of someone tired but satisfied with his work. He stopped in the backyard, put on his shirt, ran his hand through his hair, and left the way he'd come in, around the house to the motorcycle parked on the street. During all this time, I saw no sign of Anna, not a shadow of her in the window, not even a glimpse of her at the door to say goodbye. Nothing. When I heard the motorcycle speeding away, my heart was pounding. Guys, you have to understand the situation. A strange man enters the house from behind, stays inside for hours, and comes out shirtless and sweaty. And the owner of the house, a married woman, doesn't even show up to say goodbye. What would you think in a situation like that? That night, I could barely sleep. I tossed and turned, thinking about what I had seen. Could Anna have been unfaithful to Daniel? But wow, having known Anna for so many years, she has always seemed like such a proper and religious woman. She goes to Mass every Sunday at the San Benedito Church here in the neighborhood, participates in the children's ministry, and always helps out at the parish fairs. I remembered a situation that occurred here in the neighborhood about 5 years ago. Mrs. Eulalia, who lived in the yellow house on the corner, was caught by her children in a very embarrassing situation with the dance teacher who came to give them private lessons. Her children thought it was just about dancing, but they discovered there was much more to it. It was a huge scandal at the time. The entire neighborhood talked about it for months. Was the same thing happening to Anna? She couldn't stop mulling over theories. Maybe it was a personal trainer who came to give her private lessons, and they ended up hooking up. Or maybe a massage therapist. You know how these things can turn out, right? The next morning, Wednesday, I woke up earlier than usual. I had a quick breakfast, French toast with butter and coffee with milk as usual, and went straight to my post by the living room window. I wanted to see if the man would reappear, if it was a regular occurrence or just an isolated incident. I stayed there from 2 in the afternoon until almost 6, when Daniel came home from work. No red motorcycle, no mysterious man. I thought, it must have been a one-off, maybe some one-off work at his house. But something inside me told me there was more to this story. And you know a woman's intuition never fails, right? On Thursday, around 3 p.m., thought I was finishing the lunch dishes when I heard that distinctive motorcycle noise again. I ran to the window and, whoa, it was him again. The same man, the same red motorcycle, the same routine of going around the house and entering through the back. This time I was more prepared. I even grabbed my little notebook where I write down my prescriptions and decided to start jotting down the times and details. I wrote, Thursday, 3:05 p.m. A man arrived on a motorcycle. Today he's wearing a blue shirt, the same jeans. Wow, I was turning into a real private investigator. Time passed the same as the day before. He was there for just over 2 hours and came out the same, shirtless, sweaty, with his clothes in his hand. I wrote in my notebook, 5:15 p.m. Came out shirtless, sweaty, looking tired but satisfied. That's when I began to realize it wasn't a coincidence. It was a pattern. Every weekday, same time, same routine. Gosh, my mind was racing. What could be going on in that house? I decided to do a test run on Friday. Instead of standing by the living room window, I'd walk around the house trying to see different angles. My house is right next to Anna's, so from my bedroom window I can see another part of her yard. Friday arrived, and promptly at 3 in the afternoon, there he was again. This time I was able to better observe his movements in the backyard. I saw him heading straight for the laundry room, where the lowest ceiling in the house is. It seemed he was manipulating something up there, because I could see the ladder leaning against the wall and hear noises, like hammering or something. But I kept wondering why Anna hadn't shown up. Had she been locked in her room all this time? Or had she left home and left the man working alone? It didn't make sense to me, because everyone knows you shouldn't leave a worker alone at home, especially one you don't know well. The weekend arrived, and as expected, he didn't show up. Saturday and Sunday were normal days on the street. Daniel was at home helping Anna with the housework, and the two went out together to shop at Doña Rosa's market in the central plaza. Observing the couple over the weekend, I tried to detect any signs of tension, any changes in their behavior. But they seemed normal, chatting on the porch on Saturday afternoon and working together in the garden on Sunday morning. Daniel washed his car, a white Gold he's owned for about 7 years, while Anna swept the sidewalk and watered the plants. If Anna was having an affair, she acted very discreetly, because her behavior with her husband seemed completely normal. They even seemed more affectionate than other couples in the neighborhood. I saw them laughing together, chatting and sharing household chores, as always. Monday arrived and I was there, punctually at my observation post. And guess what? At 3 o'clock sharp, the mysterious man arrived again on the red motorcycle. Same routine, same route around the back of the house. Friends, that was the day I made a decision that changed everything in this story. I decided I needed to find out who this man was. I could no longer speculate or create theories. I needed answers. I waited for him to go inside and very carefully slipped out the front door and went to take a look at his motorcycle. I didn't get too close, of course, so no one would think I was being nosy. But I saw it was a red Honda, brand new, and it had a small sticker on the tank with a company name that I couldn't quite read. I returned home with more information, but still no answers. The mystery persisted. Who was this man? Why did he come every afternoon? And why did he always come out shirtless and sweaty? Guys, this situation was already keeping me up at night. Every night I thought about the possibilities, imagining possible scenarios. And the worst part was, I had no one to talk to. I couldn't tell my neighbors because they'd think I was a gossip. Or worse, they'd spread it throughout the neighborhood before we even knew the truth. The only thing I knew for sure was that this story was far from over, and that I was going to uncover the truth no matter what. Because you know how it is, right? When curiosity gets the better of us, there's no rest until we find out everything. Friends, stay tuned for this story, because you have no idea what's coming. The outcome of this situation will shock you all. I guarantee it. So stay tuned, because things are about to get even more interesting. After that first day I saw the mysterious man's motorcycle, I decided to become a real private detective here in my neighborhood. I took that little notebook I used to write down the recipes I see on TV and dedicated an entire section to this investigation. On the cover I wrote, "The Case of the Man on the Red Motorcycle." You might laugh, but I was taking it very seriously. On Tuesday of the second week, I got more organized. I got up earlier, tidied up the house quickly, had dinner practically ready, just to heat it up, and strategically positioned myself in the living room. From 2:30 p.m., I had a thermos of coffee and some cookies ready, and I even brought my knitting to pretend I was busy, in case someone passed by and saw me at the window. You have to understand one thing. Here in our neighborhood, the houses are very close together, and most of them have that old-fashioned style, with large windows and porches. From my living room, I can perfectly see Anna's house, which is diagonally across from mine. It's a small house painted light blue, with white bars on the windows, and a garden in front that she lovingly tends. At 3 o'clock sharp, I heard the motorcycle roar. This time, I paid more attention to the details. I wrote down in my notebook, Tuesday, March 27th, 3 p.m. A red motorcycle arrived. Man wearing a black t-shirt, dark jeans, and a black helmet. He got off the motorcycle, took off his helmet, dark brown with slightly wavy hair, and stored it in the motorcycle's compartment. What caught my attention this time was that he was carrying a bag, one of those canvas ones workers use to carry tools. This reinforced my theory that he was some kind of technician or service provider, but I still found it strange that he didn't go through the front door. I watched him and saw that he knew the way perfectly. He didn't hesitate for a second, heading straight for the side hallway of the house, as if it were a place he'd frequented for a long time. This intrigued me even more because Man, when you call a professional to do some work on your house, you don't just let him walk in the back like he's part of the family. This time, I managed to time his entry exactly. 3 hours and 15 minutes. At 6:15 in the evening, I saw him come out from behind the house and once again shirtless. He had his black t-shirt in his hand, all wrinkled, and he was visibly sweaty. His hair was plastered to his forehead, his face flushed from the heat as if he'd been overexerting himself. He stopped there in the backyard, leaned against the wall of the house, and took a deep breath for about 5 minutes, as if recovering from hard work. Then he put on his shirt, grabbed his tool bag, and headed back the way he'd come. I jotted everything down in my notebook, including the observation. She seems to be doing heavy physical labor, very sweaty and tired. I also began to draw a small map of Anna's house, marking where she entered and exited, trying to understand what kind of work could be done consistently in the same place. On Wednesday, I was even more prepared. In addition to my notebook and thermos of coffee, I had even borrowed a pair of small binoculars my late husband used to watch soccer games on TV. They weren't professional binoculars, but they allowed me to see the details better. The man arrived at the same time, but this time I got a better look at what he was doing in the backyard before entering the house. Through my binoculars, I saw him heading straight for Anna's laundry room roof. There was an extension ladder leaning against it, one of those aluminum ones bricklayers use for working at height. I watched him climb the ladder with his tool bag, and then he disappeared from my sight as he climbed onto the roof. I stood there watching, but all I could see was the base of the ladder. Every now and then I heard noises, like hammering or drilling, but nothing too loud. The strangest thing is that during all this time I didn't see a trace of Anna. I didn't even see her at the window, nor did I see her going out into the yard to check on the work. Nor did I even see her bringing a glass of water to the worker. Gosh, this isn't normal. All housewives keep an eye on anyone working in their house. I decided to test myself. I left home around 4 p.m., pretended I was going to Mr. Manuel's bakery, which is 2 blocks away, and drove very slowly past Anna's house. The front door was closed, as were the living room windows. There was no sign of movement inside. When I returned from the bakery, I'd brought some rolls to justify my departure. I saw the motorcycle still there, and the noises from upstairs continued. I wondered, was Anna not home? Had she left the man working alone and gone out to do something? But then I remembered. I'd seen her come home from preschool around noon, as usual. I hadn't seen her leave after that. So, where was she the whole time the man was there? On Thursday, I decided to expand my investigation. Instead of simply observing from the living room window, I would walk around my entire house, trying to gather more information from different angles. My house has 3 rooms. Mine, the one my son had before he got married and moved to São Paulo, and a small room I use as a storage room. Each room has a window facing a different direction. From the back bedroom, I could see the back of Anna's house, where the kitchen and laundry room were. It was from there that I noticed something that intrigued me even more. The man arrived at the usual time, but this time I saw him talking to someone in the backyard. I couldn't tell who it was because he was inside the house, standing in the kitchen doorway, and I could only see his shadow. But I knew it was an animated conversation, complete with gestures. After that conversation, she grabbed the ladder and climbed onto the roof as usual. But now she was sure Anna was home and knew perfectly well he was there. The question was, why had she hidden? Why didn't she appear on the street when he arrived or left? I began to develop more elaborate theories. Perhaps it was indeed an affair, but they were being very discreet so as not to arouse suspicion in the neighborhood. Perhaps the roof work was just an excuse for him to stay there, and something else was really going on. I remembered the story of Mrs. Mercedes, who lived here in the neighborhood about 10 years ago. She had hired a gardener to take care of her houseplants, but everyone suspected something was going on between them. The gardener stayed there for hours on end, always leaving sweaty and tired, and Mrs. Mercedes would give suspicious little smiles after he left. Finally, we discovered they were indeed having an affair. Mrs. Mercedes's husband found out and it caused a scandal. She had to move out of the neighborhood. The marriage ended, and it was a very embarrassing situation for everyone. Was the same thing happening to Anna? My mind raced with comparisons and scenarios, and the worst part was, I couldn't talk to anyone about it because I wasn't sure about anything and didn't want to spread unfounded rumors. On Friday, I came up with a different plan. I decided to try to find out more about this mysterious man. When he arrived and parked his motorcycle on the street, I managed to get out onto my porch, pretending to water the plants, and tried to see the motorcycle's license plate. I could only make out the first 3 letters, which were ELM. It wasn't a local license plate, I was sure of that, because I already knew most of the cars and motorcycles in the neighborhood by sight. I jotted it down in my notebook. Red Honda motorcycle. License plate ELM. Not from the area. I also got a better look at the sticker on the motorcycle's tank. It was the company logo, but it was so small I couldn't read it clearly even with glasses. It looked like he was holding a tool, maybe a screwdriver or a drill. The man's behavior remained the same. He would arrive, grab his tool bag, walk around the house, climb onto the roof, work for 3 hours, return sweaty and shirtless, get dressed, and leave. A precise routine, as if it were a scheduled job. But something was different that day. As he left, I saw Anna briefly peek out the kitchen window. It was only a second, but I knew she was watching him leave. As soon as she lost sight of him, she quickly closed the window. Guys, that scene made me certain something was up. A married woman doesn't spy on a worker through the window, especially not so discreetly. If it were just a simple housework task, she'd be there chatting with him, offering him a coffee, and asking how work was going. Over the weekend, I observed Anna and Daniel's behavior, trying to detect any changes, any signs of tension or guilt. But they still seemed like a normal couple. On Saturday morning, they went to the supermarket together. On Sunday, they attended 9 o'clock Mass at São Benedito Church. In the afternoon, they sat on the porch, chatting and drinking chimarrão. If Anna was hiding something from her husband, she was a very good actress because she showed no signs of nervousness or guilt. Or maybe Daniel knew everything and was just going along with it. But that would be even stranger, right? Monday arrived and I was eager to continue my investigation. I'd spent the entire weekend mulling over the situation, creating theories, trying to piece together the puzzle. I felt like a real detective, trying to solve a mystery. This time, I decided to be more daring. When the man arrived, instead of just standing there watching, I went out to the backyard and started hanging clothes. From the backyard, I could hear the noises from Anna's house better. I clearly heard the sound of a drill, hammering, and even the sound of tiles moving. It really sounded like roofing work, but I was still intrigued by the fact that it always happened at the same time, every day, as if on a carefully planned schedule. I also noticed that the noises would occasionally stop, as if I were resting. During these pauses, I sometimes heard low voices, as if they were talking. I couldn't distinguish the words, but I knew they were 2 voices, one male and one female. This confirmed that Anna was at home and participating in what was happening there. The question was to find out what was really going on. If it was just work on the roof, why so much secrecy? Why didn't she just admit that she had called a technician? Guys, I was getting more and more involved in this story. It was like a TV series, only it was happening right next door. Each day brought a small revelation, a new piece of the puzzle. But I was still far from understanding the whole picture. And you have no idea what was yet to come in this whole story. Friends, we've reached the part of the story where my imagination ran wild. With all the information I'd gathered, the schedules, the behaviors, the details that only a seasoned observer like me can pick up, I began to develop theories about what was really going on in that house. On Tuesday of the 3rd week of observation, I sat in my sewing chair with my notebook full of notes, trying to piece together the situation. I had written nearly 10 pages about the case of the red biker, with timetables, descriptions, and drawings of his route, all in great detail. The first theory that came to mind was the most obvious: an affair. You know the drill, right? A married woman, a mysterious man who always arrives at the same time when her husband is at work, the two of them hiding, him coming out sweaty and shirtless. Everything pointed to that, but some things didn't fit with this theory. For example, if it really was a case, why was he carrying tools? Why the constant noise of construction on the roof? And why 3 hours straight? Guys, 3 hours is a long time, even for, well, you get the idea. I remembered the story of my cousin Dircy. She discovered her husband was having an affair with his secretary because she noticed he came home smelling wonderful, wearing a different perfume, and always making excuses for working overtime. But Anna's situation was different. If it were really an affair, they wouldn't be making so much noise with the drill and hammer, would they? So I came up with my second theory: blackmail. Perhaps the man had discovered some secret about Anna and was using it to blackmail her. He went there, worked to hide it, but in reality, he was demanding money or favors. This theory worried me because, friends, Anna has always been a very good person here in the neighborhood. She helps everyone, participates in fundraising campaigns to help families in need, and always has a kind word for those going through difficult times. If someone were taking advantage of her, I couldn't stand idly by. But then I thought, if it were blackmail, I wouldn't be so calm on weekends with Daniel. Someone who's been blackmailed becomes nervous, anxious, and scared. And Anna seemed normal, even more affectionate than usual with her husband. That's when I developed my third theory, which seemed more plausible: illegal business. Perhaps they were using Anna's house as a base for some clandestine activity. The man was going there to install some kind of facility, perhaps communications equipment on the roof, or a stash for storing merchandise, hence the secrecy. I remembered a report I saw on television about people using their own homes to hide contraband. They modified the roof, created secret compartments in the walls, and installed communications equipment to coordinate their illegal activities. If so, it would explain his discreet behavior, his regular schedule, the fact that he always hung around the back of the house, and, above all, the constant work on the roof. Perhaps they were installing clandestine antennas or creating a sophisticated hideout up there. But guys, knowing Anna, that didn't make much sense either. She's a very religious and very proper person. I can't imagine her getting involved in anything illegal. Unless she was being coerced, forced to participate against her will. This possibility worried me even more. I decided to intensify my observation and try to capture more details that might confirm or refute my theories. On Wednesday, I received some new information. I was watering my plants on the porch when I saw Mrs. Laura, who lives across the street from Anna's house, leaving to take her grandson to school. I took the opportunity to chat with her. "Hello, Mrs. Laura. How are you? And your grandson? How fast is he growing?" "Oh, Mrs. Ruth, yes, thank God. That boy never sits still for a second," she replied, adjusting his backpack. So, quite naturally, I said, "Look, I noticed Anna is doing some work around the house. A repairman comes almost every day." Mrs. Laura looked thoughtfully at Anna's house. "That's right, I've seen it too. I thought something was wrong with the roof. These days of heavy rains that must have damaged some of the tiles. That must be it," I nodded. "But it's strange that he always comes at the same time, isn't it? Every day at 3 in the afternoon. Oh, maybe it's just their schedule. These professionals are very busy," she said, but I could tell she thought it was odd too. I said goodbye to her and returned home with another piece of the puzzle. If it really was a roof problem, why was it taking so long to fix? She'd been coming here every day for 3 weeks. What kind of repair takes so long? On Thursday, I decided to try an experiment. I left home around 4 p.m., pretended I was going to the pharmacy, and walked very slowly past Anna's house. I wanted to see if I could hear anything or pick up any new details. As I passed by the house, I clearly heard voices coming from above, from the roof. I couldn't understand what they were saying, but it seemed like a normal conversation between two people who knew each other well. There was no argument or nervousness. It even seemed almost like they were laughing about something. This completely ruled out my blackmail theory. If he was forcing her to do something, they wouldn't be laughing together on the rooftop. And it didn't seem like illegal activity either, because this kind of activity usually leaves people tense, always looking around, afraid of being discovered. It was then that a fourth theory began to form in my head. What if it was a relative of Anna's? Perhaps a cousin, a brother-in-law, someone in the family she didn't usually introduce to the neighbors. This would explain her proximity, the fact that she didn't supervise the work, and even why she entered through the back of the house. I remembered Anna came here about 15 years ago, when she married Daniel. She's from a nearby area, if I'm not mistaken. Perhaps she was a relative who came from there to help with some problem around the house. But if he was a relative, why so much secrecy? Why didn't she introduce him to the neighbors? And why did he always go out shirtless, covered in sweat? Even though he was a relative, he still seemed strange. On Friday, I had an idea. I decided to make a corn cake, the kind I make so well that the whole neighborhood loves it, and use it as an excuse to visit Anna. I wanted to see her reaction if I showed up while the mystery man was working. I put the cake on a nice platter, put a lot of effort into the presentation, and around 4 p.m., when I knew she was there, I went and knocked on her door. I rang the doorbell once, twice, nothing. I knew he was home, but he didn't answer. I walked around the house and knocked on the kitchen door, which is in the back. "Anna, it's Ruth. I brought you a cupcake." It took a while, but he finally appeared at the door. Wow, his face when he saw me. It was a mixture of surprise, nervousness, and even a little fear. "Oh, Mrs. Ruth, how kind of you. But look, now's not a good time because I have a headache and I was lying down," she said, taking the cake, but without inviting me in. Of course, I stood there, insisting a little. "Imagine, my child. Headaches are terrible. Do you want me to make you some tea? I have a recipe from my mother that's great for headaches." "No, that's not necessary, Mrs. Ruth. Thank you very much for the cake. You're always very kind. I'm going to rest a little and then you'll feel better," she said, clearly wanting to end the conversation. It was then that I heard a noise coming from upstairs, as if someone had dropped a tool. Anna became visibly nervous and looked up quickly, then back at me. "There must be a cat on the roof," he said, but I realized that was a lame excuse. I said goodbye to her and went home even more convinced that something was up. Her reaction was very suspicious. A person with a headache doesn't get nervous when they hear a cat on the roof. And besides, what cat can make the noise of a falling tool? Over the weekend, I observed her behavior even more closely. On Saturday morning, she was standing on the porch, watering her plants, looking completely normal. She greeted all the neighbors who passed by, chatted with Doña Rosa about the rose cuttings she had ordered, and helped Mr. Manel carry some heavy bags to her front door. At Sunday Mass, she was present as always, participating in the choir and helping organize the week's activities. After Mass, she chatted with other women from the parish about the fair they would be holding the following month. If I had been involved in something bad, I wouldn't have been so relaxed or so involved in community life. This made me definitively discard the darker theories I had developed. That's when a fifth theory came to mind, and this one seemed the most likely. Secret renovations or construction. Perhaps they were making some changes to the house that they didn't want to reveal to the neighbors yet. It could be an extension, a new roof, or even preparing the house for a guest. People often carry out renovations in secret to avoid neighbors finding out or to surprise a relative. Perhaps Anna was preparing the house for her elderly mother or creating a new bedroom in case they had children. That would explain the constant work on the roof, the sounds of the drill and hammer, the fact that he always carried tools, and even the intimacy between them. If he was a trusted professional she'd known for a long time. And that would also explain why he always came out sweaty and shirtless. Working on the roof, especially during this hot time of year, is a very demanding job. Anyone would be sweaty and want to take off their shirt to cool off. Monday arrived and I was eager to test my new theory. I settled down by the window with my notebook, determined to observe every detail that might confirm whether a renovation was indeed taking place. The man arrived punctually, at 3 p.m, as always, but this time I looked more closely at what he was carrying. In addition to the usual tool bag, he was carrying a sack that appeared to contain construction materials, perhaps cement or mortar. This reinforced my renovation theory. If it were an adventure or something shady, I wouldn't bring building materials. And if it were just a simple roof repair, I wouldn't need that much material either. During the 3 hours I was there, I heard noises that confirmed my theory. A constant hammering, the sound of a power drill, and even the distinct sound of someone mixing putty or mortar. When he came out at 6:15 p.m., he was even sweatier than usual. His shirt was completely soaked with sweat, and he even had cement marks on his hands and arms. It was clearly the result of hard construction work. Guys, I was almost sure I'd solved the mystery. It was a secret renovation Anna was doing on the house. Maybe she wanted to surprise Daniel, or maybe they'd been saving for this renovation for a long time and didn't want the neighbors to find out until it was finished. But one question still haunted me. Why so much secrecy? Why not admit he was doing renovations? And why was it always at the same time, as if it were by appointment? It was as if every answer I found generated 2 new questions. But I was determined to get to the bottom of this story, even if it was the last thing I did. Friends, we've reached the most exciting part of our story. It was in the 4th week of observation that I finally got some important clues that brought me much closer to the truth. Get ready because things are about to get really interesting. By Tuesday of that week, I was determined to find out once and for all who this mysterious man was. I couldn't stand the theories anymore. I needed facts, concrete evidence. So I came up with a plan that I still don't know how I managed to execute. I decided to follow the man after he left. I know. It sounds like something out of a detective movie, but wow. Curiosity had completely gotten the better of me. At 6 p.m, when I heard the motorcycle start, I quickly left my house and headed to the corner, pretending to sweep the sidewalk. In the distance, I saw him leaving the neighborhood's main street, heading downtown. I couldn't follow him by car because I don't drive. I never learned to, always relying on my late husband for these things. But at least I saw the direction he took. I wrote it down in my notebook. He left via Rua das Flores, toward the center. On Wednesday, I decided to be even braver. When he arrived at 3 p.m, I waited about 15 minutes, enough time for him to get up on the roof and start working, and then I went to knock on the door of Anna's neighbor, Doña Carmen. Doña Carmen is a woman my age, also a widow, and she's always been very kind to me. I thought she might have some information about what was happening nearby. Hello, Mrs. Carmen. How are you? Sorry to bother you, but may I have a coffee with you? Sure, Mrs. Ruth, come in. I need to talk to someone. We sat in her kitchen, whose window overlooks Anna's backyard. It was the perfect place to observe, without looking too suspicious. Mrs. Carmen, have you noticed Anna doing some work around the house? A man has been showing up there almost every day. She took a sip of coffee and looked thoughtful. Oh yes, I saw it. At first I thought it was a problem with the roof, but he's been coming for a few weeks, right? It must be a major repair. Have you talked to Anna about this? I asked, trying to sound casual. I tried, but she's been acting a little strange lately. The other day I greeted her in the courtyard, and she responded a little sharply. You know, it's not like her. Anna has always been very talkative. This information intrigued me even more. If Anna avoided talking to her neighbors, it meant there was really something she didn't want them to know. We stayed there talking for another hour. and during that time I was able to observe movement on the roof of the house next door. I saw the man's shadow moving up there, and I heard the usual sounds: hammering, drilling, moving materials. In one of these, Miss Carmim commented something that really caught my attention. "You know what seems strange to me, Miss Ruth. You always bring materials, but I never see debris coming out of there. If it were a major renovation, wouldn't there have to be debris? Old material?" Guys, I was right. In all the weeks I spent observing, I never saw bags of debris, pieces of broken tile, or anything like that being removed from the house. How do you do a renovation without creating debris? This disproved my theory of renovation and opened the door to other possibilities. Perhaps it wouldn't be a renovation, but a new construction. Or something I hadn't yet imagined. On Thursday, I decided to do even more daring research. I got the phone number of the school where Anna works, Escola Sorriso, about 5 blocks away, and called them, pretending it was an emergency. "Hello, good morning. Are you from Escolina Sorriso? I need to speak to Professor Anna. It's urgent." "Professor Anna? She doesn't work here anymore. She resigned about 3 weeks ago," the secretary replied. Guys, I almost fell off my chair. Anna had dropped out of school 3 weeks ago, right when the mysterious man started showing up at her house. It couldn't be a coincidence. I thanked her and hung up the phone, thinking like crazy. If Anna didn't work anymore, why did she pretend to go to work every morning? And where did she go when she was away from home? With this new information, I began to review everything I had observed over the past few weeks. Anna left home every morning at her usual time, returned at lunchtime, and stayed home until the afternoon. If she was no longer working, where did she go each morning? On Friday, I decided to follow Anna in the morning to see where she was really going. I got up early, quickly drank my coffee, and stood by the window waiting for her to leave. At 7:30 in the morning, I saw her leaving the house with her usual bag, walking down the street as if she were going to work. I waited for her to turn the corner and followed her, keeping a safe distance. Anna walked to the neighborhood central square and, you won't believe it, she sat down on a bench in the square and stayed there. She just sat there, watching people, as if she were killing time. I watched her from a distance, hidden behind a large tree in the square. She stayed there for over an hour, sometimes reading a magazine, sometimes simply watching people go by. Around 9:30, she got up and went home. Guys, this confirmed that he was no longer working, but for some reason he didn't want anyone to know. Maybe he was embarrassed about losing his job, or maybe he had a more serious reason to hide it. I returned home completely intrigued. The story was becoming increasingly complex. Anna had lost her job, pretended to still be working, and every day she was visited by a mysterious man who made noise on her roof for 3 hours straight. Monday of the 5th week arrived, and I was more determined than ever to uncover the truth. I had put together many pieces of the puzzle, but I still couldn't see the whole picture. That day, I decided to do something that might have been a bit risky, but I needed more information. When the man arrived on the motorcycle, instead of just watching, I approached him. I waited for him to park his motorcycle, and as he was taking off his helmet, I went out onto my balcony and greeted him. "Good afternoon. It's hot today, isn't it?" He looked at me a little surprised, but replied politely, "Good afternoon, ma'am. It's very hot." Take the opportunity to ask, "Are you doing any work at Anna's house? I've been hearing some noises." He looked a little embarrassed, looked at Anna's house and then back at me. "Yeah, just a little repair to the roof. Nothing serious." "That's great. Anna is a very dear neighbor. I hope it's nothing serious," I said, trying to continue the conversation. "No, it's nothing serious, just some maintenance," he replied, but I could tell he was uncomfortable with my questions. At that moment, Anna's kitchen door opened, and she appeared, visibly nervous. "Hello, Mrs. Ruth. How are you?" "Hello, my daughter. I was here talking to..." "Sorry, I didn't catch your name," I said, looking at the man. It's Carlos," he said quickly. That's right, Carlos is telling me about the roof job. I'm glad you found someone you trust to do it, I said, observing their reactions. Anna and Carlos exchanged a strange look, as if communicating without words. Then she said, "Yes, Carlos is. He's very good at what he does. Mrs. Ruth, excuse the rush, but I need to talk to him about work." Sure. I don't want to get in the way. If you need anything, I'm here," I said, and went back into the house. But man, that conversation convinced me even more that something fishy was going on. They were both clearly uncomfortable with my simple questions. If it really was just roofing work, why were they so nervous? For the rest of the week, I intensified my observation even further. I noted every detail, every suspicious movement, every change in his routine. It was as if I were putting together a complete dossier on the situation. It was on Friday of that week that something happened that almost made me discover the whole truth. Around 5 in the afternoon, while Carlos was still working on the roof, a pickup truck pulled up in front of Anna's house. An older man got out, who appeared to be Carlos's boss or supervisor. He went straight to the back of the house, climbed onto the roof, and stood there talking to Carlos for about 15 minutes. I couldn't hear their conversation, but from their gestures, I knew they were discussing something important at work. After this conversation, the two climbed down from the roof and entered the house. They stayed there for about 20 minutes, and when they came out, the older man was carrying a briefcase, as if it were a document or a contract. He said goodbye to Anna at the kitchen door. It was the first time he'd seen her speak openly to someone related to work, and left in the truck. Carlos continued working for another hour, and then left as usual. Guys, that whole scene left me feeling like I was coming to the end of something, as if the job, whatever it was about to end, and if it did, I'd miss the chance to find out the truth. That's when I made the bravest decision of this entire investigation. I decided that over the weekend, I would try to figure out what was really going on, even if it meant doing something risky. I couldn't leave this mystery unsolved after so much time observing and investigating. Friends, we've reached the end of our story, and you have no idea how different the truth is from everything I've imagined all these weeks. Prepare yourselves, because the revelation will shock you all. On Saturday morning, I was drinking coffee when I saw Anna hanging laundry in the yard. I decided it was time to talk to her alone. I couldn't stand living with that curiosity absorbing my thoughts anymore. I waited until she was alone, and then approached the fence that separated our yards. "Anna, my child, may I speak with you for a moment?" She approached the fence, but I noticed she was a little tense. "Sure, Miss Ruth. What's wrong?" "Look, honey, I don't mean to be nosy, but I've noticed you're acting a little different. And there's that guy who comes here every afternoon. If you need help with anything, you can count on me, okay?" Anna looked at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. It seemed a mixture of relief and nervousness. She was silent for a moment, as if deciding what to say. "Mrs. Ruth, you're very observant, aren't you?" he said with a somewhat awkward smile. "Ah, dear, it's just that after so many years living here, you end up noticing things. But don't worry, I'm not one to gossip." That's when he took a deep breath and said, "Do you want to know the truth about Carlos?" Guys, my heart was racing. I was finally going to uncover the mystery that had tormented me for over a month. "If you want to tell me, I promise it will stay between us," I replied, trying to contain my anxiety. Anna looked around as if checking if anyone was listening, and then said, "Charles is my cousin. Mrs. Ruth, second cousin, son of my mother's sister." Guys, I stood there staring at her, processing the information. Cousin? But then why all the mystery? Why did she come in from behind? Why did she stay hidden? "But my daughter, if he's your cousin, why don't you say so? Why doesn't he come through the front door like any relative would?" Anna sighed and continued, "It's a bit of a complicated situation, Mrs. Ruth. Carlos came here because he's been out of work for a few months. My mother asked me to help him. You know how families are." Oh, I see. And he's doing some work at your house, in exchange for staying, right? More or less that. In fact, he's tidying up our attic. We never use that space upstairs, but now that he needs to stay here for a while, I decided it was a good time to take advantage and make a little space for him there. Guys, attic! I didn't even know Anna's house had an attic. That explains why I saw him climbing on the roof, but never saw him working on it. So he lives with you? I asked, still trying to put the pieces together. No. He's staying in a small boarding house nearby on the back street, but he comes here every day to work in the attic. It's hard work, Mrs. Ruth. We have to tear down walls, install electrical wiring, do thermal insulation. That's why he sweats so much and gets so tired. It started to make sense. The attic is right under the roof, so it must be really hot, especially at that time of year. Anyone would sweat working up there for 3 hours straight. But why didn't you tell your neighbors? We totally understand, I persisted, still curious about the secrecy. Anna, a little embarrassed, explained, "Oh, Miss Ruth, it's just that, since you're unemployed and homeless, we were afraid the neighbors would think you were lazy or causing trouble in the neighborhood. You know how people are, don't you? Sometimes they judge without knowing." Oh, how unfair I was being to poor Anna. She was just trying to help a family member in need, and I was making up 1,000 theories. "And why does he come in from behind the house?" I asked, wanting to get everything straight. "Because the attic is accessed via the utility room stairs. There's no way to get there from inside the house. Plus, it's always covered in cement and paint, so it's best to go straight in through the utility room to avoid dirtying the whole house." What nonsense. Of course he came in through the back if that was the case. And of course he was sweating working in a stifling attic. And of course he took off his shirt to cool off after working hard. Anna, sorry for being so nosy. We do care about our neighbors, don't we? But now I understand everything. Imagine, Mrs. Ruth, you were so kind and concerned. In fact, I even wanted to tell the neighbors, but Daniel thought it best not to say too much. He's a bit reserved about these family matters. Then I understood why Daniel seemed normal on the weekends. He knew everything from the beginning. It wasn't a secret he was keeping from him. It was simply the couple's decision not to make the situation public. "So how's the attic coming along? It must be turning out to be a very nice room," I commented, trying to be more positive. "Oh, Mrs. Ruth, how beautiful this is turning out. Carlos is very handy. He does everything. He's already installed the electrical system, done the thermal insulation, and is finishing the floor. He'll start painting next week, and then it'll be ready." "Great! And he'll be living there when I'm done?" "For a while, yes. Until he finds a job and gets his bearings. Poor thing. He's going through a tough time. His wife passed away last year. He was a bit lost. He lost his job. Family has to help each other in these times, right? What a sad story. And I was thinking stupid things about him. He was going through a difficult time. And Anna was an angel in his life. Anna, if you need anything at all, you can count on me. I have some things stored here at home that can help furnish the room." Her eyes lit up. "Oh, Mrs. Ruth, how sweet of you. Carlos will be very happy to know he has such kind neighbors." "And why did you quit school?" I asked, remembering the information I had discovered. She looked a little embarrassed. "Oh, did you hear about that too? I quit my job to stay home and help Carlos with the attic work. He doesn't know the city that well. He doesn't know where to buy materials, that sort of thing. And besides, I was kind of tired of that job. I've been thinking about changing careers for a while." "I see. And what do you do in the morning when you leave the house?" "I'm going to look for a new job. I'm dropping off my resume at several schools in the area doing interviews. But I didn't want the neighbors to say I'm unemployed, you know? That's why I pretend I'm still working normally." What a situation. The poor woman was unemployed, helping a cousin in need, and on top of that, worried about what the neighbors would think. That afternoon, Carlos arrived at his usual time, but this time he had a completely different perspective on the situation. Instead of suspicion and curiosity, I felt admiration for Anna's solidarity and compassion in the face of the young man's plight. Around 5 in the afternoon, I decided to do something I should have done a long time ago. Be a good neighbor. I made a pitcher of iced lemon juice and some sandwiches and took them to Anna's house. Anna, I brought Carlos a snack. Working in the attic in this heat, he's sure to need something refreshing. Her look of surprise and gratitude was touching. Mrs. Ruth, how kind. She'll be very happy. He called Carlos, who came down from the attic sweating, his shirt soaked and his hair sticking to his forehead. Seeing the snack, he was almost moved. Well, Mrs. Ruth, thank you very much. You needn't have bothered me. Imagine my son. It's the least I can do. By the way, I apologize for being a little overly observant these past few weeks. We do care about our neighbors, don't we? He smiled. It was very kind of you to care. And thank you so much for the refreshments. I really needed something cold. We sat down to chat for a few minutes, and I learned a little about his story. He was going through a very difficult time. He lost his wife in a car accident, fell into depression, eventually lost his job, and now he was trying to start over. Anna and Daniel not only helped him with housing, but also provided emotional support, helping him recover. It was a beautiful display of family love. Guys, what a shame. I spent over a month creating absurd theories, imagining betrayal, blackmail, and illegal business dealings, when in reality, it was simply a family helping each other through a difficult time. From that day on, every time Carlos arrived at work, I would greet him from the window. Sometimes I would bring him a snack, a cold juice, or simply ask how work was going. He was always very kind and grateful. The following week, as Anna had predicted, he began painting the attic. The smell of fresh paint confirmed that the job was practically finished. And on Friday, he showed up with a clean shirt and wasn't as sweaty as usual. "There you go, Mrs. Ruth. The little room is finished," he said, smiling. "How wonderful. I'm sure it will look beautiful." Anna even invited me to see the attic on Sunday. Wow, it turned out beautiful. A small but cozy room, with a window overlooking the backyard, tiled floors, light blue walls, and even a small bookshelf she made for me. "Carlos, you're so talented. It was perfect." I congratulated him sincerely. "Thank you, Mrs. Ruth. Now all I have to do is hope I get a job soon and get organized." And did you know that 2 weeks later, he succeeded? He got a job as a foreman at a local construction company. Anna beamed with happiness, as if it were her victory too. Today, Carlos lives in the small attic he built himself, works at the construction company, has recovered emotionally, and has practically become a member of Anna and Daniel's family. On weekends, they have barbecues in the backyard and always invite me. Anna also got a new job at a private school in the neighborhood and feels much happier and more professionally fulfilled. And best of all, she no longer hides anything from her neighbors. Now she tells them everything, asks for their opinions, and participates in community life, as has always been her way. Friends, this story taught me a very important lesson. Things aren't always what they seem. Sometimes, behind a seemingly suspicious situation, there's simply love, solidarity, and family support. I spent over a month creating wild theories, when the truth was far more beautiful and simple than I could have imagined. She was just a kind woman helping a family member in need, and a hard-working man trying to rebuild his life after a great loss. Today, when I look through the crack in my curtain, because you know we never lose the habit of observing neighborhood life, I see things differently. I'm still curious about what's happening in the neighborhood, but now I always try to think about the good things about people first, before creating negative theories. What did you think of my story? Have you ever been in a similar situation? Did you observe something you thought was one thing, only to find it completely different? Tell me your stories in the comments because I love hearing gossip. Or rather, my neighbor's observations. If you liked my story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel because I have a lot more to share about what I see behind the curtains. And look, Next week, I'll tell you about that time Doña Benedita started receiving very strange packages every night, and what I discovered will leave you speechless. See you next time, and remember, sometimes reality is much more beautiful than our imagination.